The air inside the law office felt too still, too thick, like time itself had paused and was holding its breath. I walked in with slow, steady steps, each one a quiet defiance. My shoes didn't click on the old wood floor like Charmaine's heels always did. I didn't come here to make noise. I came to bear witness. Mr. Pierce's office hadn't changed in decades. Oak-paneled walls, books lined up like soldiers, and the faint scent of pipe tobacco and lemon polish. It reminded me of church, of Sunday afternoons when people wore their best lies and said, "God bless you," through tight jaws. Malik and Charmaine swept in 10 minutes late, all perfume and Prada. She wore a fur-trimmed jacket even though the Georgia sun still held on outside. They laughed at something light and stupid, and I didn't turn around. I just adjusted the sleeves on my modest cream blouse and kept my eyes ahead. "You think this gon' take long?" Charmaine's voice cut the silence. "Hope they leave something worth your time, Mama." My hands stayed folded in my lap, palms warm and damp. I didn't respond, didn't flinch. But something in my chest gave way. Just a bit. That woman never missed a chance to stab where it still bled. We sat. Mr. Pierce greeted us with that polite stiffness old white men carry in Southern offices like these. He nodded to me like I was his Sunday school teacher, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. He saw the tension. Everybody did. But no one said a thing. Charmaine made sure to sit closest to the head of the table. She leaned back like she owned the place, and Malik, well, my boy scrolled through his phone, thumbs tapping like the world outside mattered more than the woman who raised him. I sat near the door, quiet, almost like a visitor. That wasn't by accident. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small napkin, leaf-shaped, from a set I'd kept since the 80s. Smoothed it on my lap like I had done every Sunday dinner, every Christmas morning. A piece of home, a reminder to stay composed. Mr. Pierce cleared his throat and opened the file. The will. He started with the formalities, legal language that never did care for emotion. As he spoke, my heart pounded like an old engine trying to turn over. Malik's name came first. He got the house. Then the car, the one I cleaned every Saturday, even after my arthritis made it near impossible to wring the cloth. Charmaine gave him a look like she'd just won a game, then leaned in and whispered, "Mama probably gets the old photos and them dusty church hats." My breath caught. I didn't look at her. Just let my fingers press gently into the napkin, smoothing the fabric again. I remembered what Walter told me before he passed. "Don't let him take your peace, Elle. You don't need to raise your voice to prove your worth." But in that room, their whispers sliced louder than any shout. Then came the pause. Mr. Pierce held a page like it was burning in his hand. Everyone noticed. "Oh, I know," Charmaine said, loud enough for even the walls to hear. "She gets nothing. Maybe that busted record player she loves so much." Laughter. Real, sharp laughter. From the cousins, from folks who never called but came for crumbs. Malik still didn't look at me. I felt the heat rise up through my throat, but I didn't move. That familiar ache, the one I'd carried through years of being dismissed, unseen, unheard, it settled in like an old friend. Mr. Pierce shifted in his seat. A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. And something changed. That smile. It wasn't pity. It wasn't awkwardness. It was a knowing, like he'd been waiting for this part. The room quieted. The smirks faded. He cleared his throat again. "Actually," he said, eyes now locked on Malik, "the company was never under your name." Silence cracked the room open. My grip on the napkin tightened, but I didn't react. Not yet. Inside, a voice rose, not screaming, but steady. "They think silence means surrender. They think calm is weakness. Let them." I kept my head up. They've mistaken my silence for weakness for too long, I thought. But the truth don't need to shout. It just needs to be heard. I pressed the napkin flat one last time. Every wrinkle gone. My hands still. Then Mr. Pierce leaned forward, his tone changing, and everyone's laughter died at once. The room was dead quiet after Mr. Pierce's words. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to pause between ticks. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared ahead, keeping my breath steady. Folks say silence is golden, but in that moment, it was armor. Malik's jaw shifted. What do you mean? It's not in my name? Mr. Pierce didn't look rattled. He adjusted his glasses and continued. The business, as of its incorporation and through every filing since, has remained in Mr. Walter Brown's sole name. Charmaine let out a sharp breath. That can't be right. Malik's been running that shop for 10 years. Mr. Pierce nodded slightly, flipping a page. Yes, but management and ownership are two different matters. And per Walter's final update, dated 6 weeks before his passing, ownership transfers directly to Mrs. Elaris Brown. I heard it, that shift, the weight in the room moving toward me. I didn't reach for it. I just sat still, hands on my lap, fingers pressing gently into the folds of my napkin again. Composed. What kind of joke is this? Malik stood up now, voice louder. He promised me that shop. I've been handling the books, the employees, the day-to-day. You think she even knows where the damn fuse box is? I didn't flinch. Didn't need to. He was unraveling all on his own. Charmaine turned her full body toward me. What'd you do? Sweet-talk him on his deathbed? Feed him soup and lies? I tilted my head slightly, looking her in the eye. Calm. I was his wife, not his competitor. Mr. Pierce cleared his throat. I can clarify further. He opened a folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. These are Walter's personal notes, handwritten, verified. He explained his decision, and I quote, "Character should always outweigh blood." That line landed like thunder. Some cousins who'd been whispering just moments ago suddenly sat up straighter. A few nodded, barely. I remembered that night, Walter and I sitting at the kitchen table, back when we still had mismatched chairs and a leaky faucet. He'd written that first business plan on a legal pad I bought at the dollar store. I helped him name the place. Brown's Corner Goods. I hand-painted the sign. They never knew that. Never cared to. You manipulated him, Charmaine spat. You played him against his own son. I looked at her. I helped him build it. From nothing. Malik's face twisted. So what? I'm just cut out? Just like that? Mr. Pierce nodded solemnly. That's what the will states. Your name was never listed on any title, not even provisionally. He sank back into his chair, deflated. The laughter from earlier, gone. Now just breathing and thick silence. I let the quiet hold. Then I spoke, voice steady, just loud enough. You mocked me for showing up. Now tell me, what's harder to swallow, the truth or your pride? Charmaine jumped up. You're cold. You're just bitter that he loved his son more. I didn't move. Malik walked out then, muttering something under his breath. The door swung closed behind him. No one chased after. Mr. Pierce gathered the folders. Mrs. Brown, I'll need you back next week to begin the transfer process. I nodded once. No smile. Just a small breath out. As I stepped into the elevator, the hush of the hallway wrapped around me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aware of everything that had been taken, twisted, ignored, and now returned, not as a gift, but a task. I pressed the napkin in my palm until the folds were sharp again. My reflection in the elevator door didn't look proud. It looked resolved. They thought this was about money, I thought, watching the numbers tick down. But it's always been about respect. What none of them knew was that the will held one more surprise. The ride home felt longer than it should have. Streets I knew like the back of my hand looked unfamiliar through the haze of everything that had just unfolded. By the time I pulled into the driveway, dusk had dipped the sky in indigo. I sat there in the car for a moment, watching the porch light flicker on automatically. Walter had set it up like that years ago. So you'll never come home to darkness, he'd said. Funny how some things age into irony. Inside, the house felt different. Not cold, not empty, just waiting. That kind of stillness you feel in churches after the choir's gone. I kicked off my shoes at the door, put the kettle on like I always did. Chamomile. just enough honey to soften the bitterness, a ritual to keep my hands from trembling. I passed the living room, didn't dare look at the mantel where his photo sat, but my eyes stopped at his old roll-top desk. It hadn't been touched since the funeral. His glasses were still folded neatly next to the ledger book he loved more than he ever admitted. Something in me tugged toward it. Not nostalgia, something heavier. I sat down. The drawer stuck like always. I yanked, just enough to break its stubbornness, and there it was. An envelope, cream-colored. My name in his handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Only for Alaris, if they come for you. My hands froze. Then slowly, I peeled it open. He'd written the letter by hand. No signature at the end, just that final curve of his lowercase s that always trailed off like he'd been interrupted mid-thought. He knew. He'd heard them. In his words, he described how he overheard Malik and Charmaine talking, in hushed tones late one night, thinking he was asleep. Once he's gone, we'll redo everything. Mama won't be in charge of nothing. He said he'd spoken to one of Malik's friends, that slick accountant, who told him not to worry about it, but he did. Enough to rewrite the will, enough to hide bank documents, enough to leave this for me. Forgive me for leaving you to clean up what I helped create. That line hit harder than anything else. He included account numbers, key contacts, and a warning. Don't trust anyone who knew about this before me. The implication was clear. Some folks might have known more than they let on. I held the letter against my chest, trying to feel something, sorrow maybe, but what I felt was heat, rising in my throat, not grief, anger, not because he kept it secret, but because he waited, all that time, sitting with the truth while I smiled at them across dinner tables, sewed buttons on Charmaine's dresses, handed Malik keys with a mother's pride. He gave me the tools, but not the truth. That ain't protection. That's punishment in disguise. I sat back, staring at the ceiling. Is this what it meant to be a black mother? To hold your tongue, keep the family together, swallow what you should have spit out years ago. My mama did it. Her mama, too. Maybe it was tradition. Maybe it was a curse. I opened the envelope again, pulled out the documents. Spreadsheets, deeds, statements, evidence of everything. They'd tried to erase me before the body was cold. I could feel it now. The speed of it. How calculated it all was. I locked everything up. Scanned the papers, uploaded them to cloud storage, something Dana taught me last Christmas. I didn't call her, not yet, not anyone, because trust costs too much now. Instead, I took out my old journal. Pages yellowed. I hadn't touched it in years. I wrote, "They gonna try and rewrite history, but I'll write the truth myself." I turned to the emails next. Walter had kept archives. Lord knows why, but he did. Buried in a folder called Personal. And there it was, a thread Charmaine thought she deleted. To a real estate agent. Using a fake power of attorney, trying to sell a piece of the property, the back lot where Walter's dad planted pecan trees back in the 40s, I printed everything. Put it in a folder. Labeled it, insurance. She thought I'd be weeping. They all did. But mourning can wait. They expected a widow in mourning. What they'll get is a mother in motion. The next morning, I made my first call, not to the family, but to the woman who taught me never to flinch. I stepped through the front door slower than usual. The air inside was thicker, somehow, not hot, just heavy, the kind of quiet that don't feel peaceful, but watchful. I set my purse down gently, like any sudden move might shake something loose. The house was familiar, same wood creak under the third step, same picture of me and Walter on our honeymoon still on the entry table, but something felt moved. I noticed one of the family photos on the hallway wall was missing. The space where it hung had a dust outline around it like a ghost. Another picture, me holding Malik as a baby, was still there, but crooked. It wasn't like that when I left this morning. I walked straight to the kitchen, flipped the coffee pot on, and leaned against the counter. The documents from Walter were still in my purse. I hadn't let them out of my sight. I pulled them out and sat at his old desk in the den, the one with the leather seat that still creaked when I leaned back. I laid the letter flat on the wood again, rereading it even though I knew every word now. I've carried this house for years, I whispered to myself. Now I must carry its truth. It wasn't 5 minutes before a knock hit the door like thunder. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the window, I saw Tyrion, tall, tense, and dressed like he was headed to a courtroom. Zelina stood behind him, arms folded, and Miss Carla from next door was conveniently trimming her roses, pretending not to watch. I opened the door just enough. "Evening," I said. Tyrion didn't wait for an invitation. "We need to talk, now." I looked him dead in the face, stepped aside. "Then talk." He walked into my living room like he owned the place. Zelina followed, saying nothing. Tyrion looked around, not at me, but at the walls, at the photos, at the space where one used to be. He turned, his voice low but sharp. "Let's not pretend this is yours now." "That business was always meant to stay in the family." I raised an eyebrow. "You're looking at the family," he scoffed. "You were just the wife, Alaris. You never ran the business. You barely showed up." I stayed seated, hands folded, calm. "Check the incorporation papers. My name's been on it since '89. Ask the bank. Ask your uncle. Ask the people who watched me clean grease off those floors and balance those books before Malik could spell revenue." Zelina shifted like she wanted to disappear, but Tyrion pressed on. "You think this is about paperwork? This is legacy. And only the true heirs should be in control of that." He meant Malik. He meant himself. I didn't blink. Walter didn't think so, and the law agrees with Walter. Tyrion laughed, not funny, not warm. "You're sentimental. That's your problem. You think love equals ownership." I stood up then, slow and deliberate. "And you think blood excuses betrayal. That's yours." He left without another word. Just walked out the front door like he hadn't just tried to strip my name out loud. I didn't breathe easy until the door clicked shut. I went straight to Walter's old laptop. Took me a minute to remember the password, his birthday, and our anniversary. He never changed it. The desktop still had that photo of him fishing off the dock with Malik, back when things were still soft between them. I opened the email folder marked Business. And there they were. Emails between Tyrion and Charmaine. Planning. Strategizing. Writing things like, "Once she's out the way," and "We'll restructure the board quietly if she resists." They weren't just planning to leave me out. They built the scissors themselves. I backed up every file to a hard drive I bought last Christmas but never used. Made sure to encrypt it. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about survival. Then I picked up the phone. "Miss Laverne," I said when she answered. "You free tomorrow?" "For you, baby. I'll cancel church rehearsal. I need you to bring folks, ones who remember, ones who saw what I did and what I didn't." She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Wear flats." I hung up and opened a blank document, typed the title, "A Voice Not Silenced." I wrote the first paragraph of what might one day be an open letter to the community. I didn't post it. Not yet. Timing matters more than truth sometimes. Truth just needs to be ready when the door opens. Before I went to bed, I passed the photo wall again. This time, I took the crooked one down. I placed it on the mantel, next to Walter's picture. Let them sit eye to eye. Let them remember what I looked like before they tried to forget me. I shut the laptop for the night. That's when it happened. A message popped up, plain white text on black. "We've tracked your backup. Return the files." I stared at the screen. Someone was watching me already. Morning light slipped through the blinds, cutting lines across my kitchen table where the documents still sat. Neat, but heavy with meaning. I hadn't slept more than a few hours. My mind kept replaying Charmaine's smirk, Malik's threats, and that final line in my husband's letter. I reached for the envelope again, fingertips tracing his handwriting, before pushing it aside. There wasn't anything new in it, but reading it grounded me, reminded me why I couldn't back down. I brewed coffee, the smell filling the house like courage. Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and began to type. The words came sharp, measured. I titled it, "A Voice Not Silenced." I wrote about what it means to build something from nothing, about the women who carry families and still end up erased. I mentioned the Baptist church on Auburn, The block where our store once stood. The way our people built even when no one handed us tools. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about dignity. Halfway through the second paragraph, there was a knock. Zelina's soft voice came through the door. "Mama, you up?" She stepped in, hair still wrapped, holding 2 cups of coffee like a peace offering. "You didn't rest," she said, noticing the glow from my screen. "No," I replied, not looking up. Rest don't come easy when truth's been buried this long. She hesitated, eyes flicking over my shoulder to the letter. "You really gonna send that out? Maybe you can still talk to them, settle this before it gets ugly." I turned to her. "It's already ugly, baby. I'm just giving it light." Her eyes landed on one line. "Betrayal is quiet until it starts calling you by your first name." She flinched. "That's harsh, Mama. People will know who you mean." "I'm not writing for people's comfort," I said. "I'm writing for truth." Before she could respond, the door swung open so hard it hit the wall. Charmaine stood there, red lipstick too bright for morning, her heels clicking like she owned the ground beneath her. "So it's true," she said, waving her phone. "You're writing to the press about us? About me?" I didn't stand. "About us, yes. About truth, yes. You really think this makes you noble? You're about to embarrass this family in front of everybody from here to Decatur." "The truth don't embarrass, Charmaine. Lies do." Her laugh was bitter. "You've lost your mind. You're still living in that house, eating off the money he left, and you dare bite the hand that fed you?" I looked at her, calm. "I built that house with him. I paid those bills when he couldn't. The only thing I bit was my tongue for too many years." She took a step closer. "If you send that letter, I'll drag you into court for defamation. Don't test me, Alaris." "If telling the truth is defamation," I said slowly, "then I'd rather be guilty than silent." Zelina whispered, "Please, stop." "This isn't worth it." Charmaine glared at her. "You better decide whose side you're on, Zelina. Mama's going to bring ruin on all of us." Then she slammed the door so hard, a picture fell from the wall. For a long moment, all I could hear was the ticking clock and my own breath. Later that morning, I drove to the community center. The sky was pale gray, the kind that feels like it's waiting on something. Miss Laverne was already there, leaning on her cane near the bulletin board. Inside, a few elders had gathered, people who'd known my husband since before he could afford a suit. I laid the printed draft on the table. "I need your thoughts," I said, voice steady. They read in silence. Some frowned, others nodded. One man spoke first, his tone cautious. "Sister, you sure you want to stir this pot? They'll come after you for this." "They already have," I said. "This ain't stirring. This is surviving." Miss Laverne smiled softly. "You got fire in you again, baby." "That's good. They can't silence every widow with courage." The room hummed with quiet agreement. By the end, a few neighbors signed their names to support the statement, not for the newspaper, but as witnesses that I wasn't alone. When I got back home, a bright envelope sat on my doorstep, certified mail. I tore it open. The header read, "Cease and desist." Inside, legal language twisted like barbed wire. Charmaine's lawyer demanded I retract my libelous claims or risk forfeiture of estate assets. Before I could finish reading, my phone rang. "Malik." "Mom," he said sharply, "you've crossed a line. You're going to destroy what Dad built. Take that letter back before this gets ugly." I stayed quiet for a second. "Son, what your father built is already being destroyed, just not by me." He sighed, frustrated. "You think the community cares about your version of the truth? This is family business." "Then the family should have acted like one," I said, and ended the call. That evening, I sat back down at my desk. I opened my laptop again, reread the draft. Then I hit send, not to the newspaper yet, but to my attorney and 2 reporters who'd covered local corruption cases before. After that, I sent a redacted version to a small, Black-owned radio station downtown with a note. "This is the beginning of something important." I closed the computer and walked through the quiet house. The walls felt alive with memory. My husband's portrait hung in the hall. Steady eyes watching, lips curved in a faint smile. You taught me how to build, I whispered. Now watch me protect what we built. As I turned off the light, my phone lit up on the counter, an unfamiliar number flashing again and again. Late that afternoon, I pulled into the driveway with the weight of the community center meeting still fresh on my shoulders. The air smelled like rain and tension. I braced myself against the doorframe, noticing the mail on the welcome mat. Among the envelopes was one thick and official, with my name in bold. I picked it up, fingers trembling. I knew trouble before seeing the letterhead. Inside, Tyrion's attorneys revoked my co-signer access to all shared bank accounts, effective immediately. They cited unauthorized public statements and threatened further action unless I retracted the letter I drafted. My chest felt like it had stone in it. I folded the notice, gripped my leaf-shaped napkin from my purse, and held it tight. A small anchor in the storm. No sooner had I set it down than Malik burst through the door. "You went too far, Mom," he hissed, his face red. "You chose this war." He wasn't alone. Charmaine entered right behind him, arms crossed. "Shut that letter down," she spat. "Your words will burn the house down, including your share." They accused, contended, threatened. Tyrion's voice came over the speaker, clipped and cold, calling me reckless, manipulative. But when it was my turn, I stood calm. "You can threaten my accounts, but you can't threaten my truth." Zelina watched that, her eyes wide, stepping back under Charmaine's glare. Later, Miss Laverne and I sat in the passenger seat as Caldwell's office came into view. Inside, Miss Caldwell pored over the notice with steady fingers. "They overstepped," she said. "We have grounds to challenge this." She laid out a plan, formal response, injunctions, redirecting income, even public exposure of their threats. I questioned if making it public would turn the tide against me. She met my eyes. "We have the facts. They have the fear." Walking out of her office, my phone buzzed with previews of the notice posted on a local news blog. Strangers commenting, neighbors whispering, some siding with me, others condemning me. Miss Laverne read aloud a few support messages. "You're finally saying out loud what we've been whispering," one read. A radio host texted, "Want me to put you on air tonight?" I paused, fingers hovering. If I said yes, that would be stepping into open fire. But I also knew silence might cost me more. By evening, I was back in my office, papers strewn across the desk, heart pounding. I wrote out steps, release full text, secure alternate bank channels, call Caldwell first thing. I leaned toward Otis's portrait and said quietly, "I fight for legacy, not for pride." I locked the drives, drawn the curtains, and sat in the dim glow. Then the phone lit up. It was midnight. The radio host calling live. I took a slow breath, reached for the phone. The morning had barely broken when I drove to Mr. Pierce's office. My nerves sat hollow, but my resolve was firm. I passed through the reception lobby with Zelina beside me. She walked quietly, head bowed, but I felt her presence. I remind myself this is about truth, not victory. Inside the conference room, faces I thought were steady seemed to tremble when the door clicked shut. Tyrion held up a small device. "I call this evidence," he said. Then he played it. My voice, distorted yet clear enough, saying I would relinquish my claim and walk away. The moment hung in the air like smoke. Charmaine leaned forward, her voice slick. "See? She always had her own plan. This isn't righteousness. It's self-serving widow behavior." Families shifted in their seats, some nodding, some pursing lips. I stayed calm, watching, learning who flinched. Mr. Pierce raised a hand. "This is admissible only if metadata checks out. Evidence can be challenged." His tone cut the tension. Charmaine demanded I retract the letter publicly, apologize on record. She slammed her fist. "You humiliate us. You humiliate our name," I replied without anger. "That recording is forged. You used lies to frame me." Tyrion's face turned sharp. "Are you accusing your own child of collusion? I'll move to have you excluded from decisions entirely." Zelina's voice broke the tension. "Why are we doing this in public? We promised unity. Why so much hate?" Her question echoed. I felt the weight of every stare in that room. Then, Ms. Caldwell, seated at the corner, whispered, Check the file's metadata. See when it was created. Together, we asked that the clip be examined. The room went still. After what felt like an hour, the expert, brought in by my lawyer, stood. Metadata timestamp created less than a week ago, not months ago, as presented. Gasps erupted. Charmaine's face went pale. Tyrion spluttered. That's tampered, I said. Truth has no timeline. Lies do. Mr. Pierce reopened the envelope from the original will. He read aloud the codicil Otis added, naming me primary owner. He spoke the words Walter penned with the same hand that signed our marriage license decades ago. Silence swallowed the room. Some faces reddened, others cracked. Charmaine lunged to interrupt, but Mr. Pierce held up his hand. Quiet, the document stands. I sat there, heart pounding, but my voice steady. I remembered what I once whispered. They insisted on burying my name. He insisted on raising it. As people filed out, I lingered. Charmaine left first, shaken, eyes avoiding mine. Zelina approached, voice soft. Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I nodded. No lectures, just acceptance. Malik passed by me without a word. I didn't resent him. I slipped my leaf-shaped napkin from my purse, folded it with care, placed it on the conference table, a quiet marker of presence, of dignity. I walked out into the corridor. No applause. No fanfare, but I felt something settle inside. The game had shifted. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Jamarcus. You had better check the second codicil. I paused in the hallway, another secret. I got to the law office before the sun fully cleared the skyline. The world outside was still gray, quiet, as if even the city knew what was coming. I carried my files close, every document labeled, every copy clean. Miss Laverne was already sitting across from my seat, dressed in her church best blue, reading over the witness statements she'd helped gather. She looked up when I entered, eyes calm but firm. You ready, baby? She asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. We sat in silence for a while. She hummed low under her breath, that same hymn she'd sung at my wedding all those years ago. It steadied me. I went over my notes again. No anger, no shaking, no raising my voice. Just truth. When the first footsteps echoed in the hallway, I breathed in slow, whispered to myself, Stay centered, Alaris. This time, you lead the storm, not run from it. By the time the boardroom filled, I could feel every eye on me. The air was tight, too still. Tyrion sat at one end, Charmaine beside him, all pride and ice. Mr. Pierce stood near the head of the table, papers ready. Malik leaned against the wall, pretending he didn't care, but his jaw was set hard. Zelina sat closest to me, hands folded like she was praying without words. Tyrion started the meeting with that same smooth, empty confidence he'd practiced since boyhood. We're here to settle ongoing disputes caused by Mother's activities, he said, like I was a headline in one of his press briefings. Charmaine followed quickly. She's been using Father's name to stir attention, to manipulate sympathy. It's embarrassing. I didn't move, not even to blink. I waited until the room went quiet again, then I said evenly, I never left. The words dropped like glass hitting marble. The kind of silence that follows truth filled every corner. You just refused to see me, I added. My tone was low, but it carried. You thought locking me out would erase me. But I was here the whole time, holding on to the pieces of what your father built while you turned it into currency. Charmaine's face twisted, but before she could speak, I laid out the documents, witness statements, letters Otis had written by hand, copies of business amendments that tied my name to every cornerstone of the foundation. Tyrion's mouth opened, but no sound came. Mr. Pierce stepped in, pulling out a sealed envelope. Per the estate's regulations, he said, this codicil has remained unopened until today. He broke the seal. His reading voice was measured, each word like a strike of iron. The clause stated clearly that Charmaine's transfer of shares had never been completed. Any claim she had was null. The ownership defaulted, by law and by Otis's written will, back to me. The color drained from Charmaine's face. That can't be, she whispered, reaching for Tyrion's arm. He promised, Pierce interrupted softly. We had a handwriting analyst verify both documents. Your copy bears a forged signature. You could hear the breath leave the room. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause. Tyrion slammed a hand on the table. You can't do this to her. This is manipulation. No, I said quietly, standing. This is consequence. Zelina was crying softly now. She didn't say a word, just placed her hand on mine beneath the table. The same hand that used to pass me biscuits at Sunday dinner now trembled, but it was full of peace. Charmaine sat frozen. The woman who'd always had something to say finally had none. I warned you, I said. Lies will always find their way home. Mr. Pierce gathered the files. The meeting adjourned. Lawyers left in hushed groups. The sound of heels faded down the hallway. When it was just us left, Charmaine slumped in her chair, Tyrion pacing, Zelina at my side, I let the quiet stretch. Then I turned toward the door and said one last thing before leaving. This house is home, not a throne for tyrants. Outside, the corridor lights glowed soft gold. For the first time in years, my steps didn't feel heavy. I walked steady, almost slow, letting each moment land before the next began. That evening, the house was calm again. I'd made a small dinner, but I wasn't hungry. I just sat in the hallway near Otis's portrait, the light from the lamp casting his eyes in shadow. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the old leaf-shaped napkin. It was worn now, the corners soft from being folded too many times. I smoothed it gently, thinking about all the moments it had been with me, through fear, anger, and truth. I fought for us, I whispered to the portrait. Not for pride, for the promise you made that our name would mean something more than greed. I tucked the napkin back into my blouse pocket and stood. The floor creaked under my feet as I crossed to the front door. When I opened it, the cool air carried the faint smell of rain. It felt clean. I stepped out onto the porch, breathing deep. The sky was purple now, the kind of color that comes right before night truly settles. The war was done. Maybe not the healing, but the battle had ended in truth. Then my phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down, Jamarcus, his name glowing across the screen. I answered. Mom. His voice was low, shaken. There's one more secret. It's in his safe. The night air grew still around me. I didn't move, didn't speak, just listened to the quiet hum of the line, knowing that peace, like truth, never comes easy. Jamarcus stepped into my kitchen just as the dawn light softened the walls. He held an envelope, edges frayed, with those 3 words in Otis's handwriting. To Ilaris. He wouldn't meet my eyes as he placed it before me. I opened it slowly, unfolding the yellowed pages. The script was unmistakable, his voice in ink. He admitted he'd been blind to my sacrifices, that Charmaine had twisted him more than I realized. He confessed that he believed easier lies over painful truths. Then, beneath the letter, I found documents. Zelina's birth certificate. Adopted, yes, but mine by birth as well, Otis had written. My heart shifted. And lastly, a deed to land in Mississippi, under my maiden name, a secret he'd kept as security for my future. My breath hitched. Years of questions, doubts, pain, all the invisible weight of wanting to be seen crashed over me. But there was peace, too. Truth doesn't erase pain, but it redeems it. Later, I walked the gravel path to the cemetery. I hadn't been back since the will reading. The air was soft, quiet. I carried the napkin and the letter, and when I reached Otis's grave, I knelt. I placed both items on the stone. I whispered, "You failed me in life, but in death, you tried to right it." I didn't cry. Instead, I spoke steadiness and grief. I forgive you, but I will never forget. Memories came, laughter in our kitchen, quiet Sunday mornings, his hands touching mine. One soft wind stirred. It felt like grace. That evening, I invited Zelina, Jamarcus, Miss Laverne to dinner. My kitchen smelled of greens, yams, baked chicken, food that tasted like lineage. We sat close, voices low, honest. Pain and regret surfaced. Dreams, too. I pulled out a small locket, mine when I was younger. and gave it to Zelina. She opened it, tears pooling. She looked at me and said softly, "Mama." The word held the space between us. No defense, just connection. Jamarcus cracked a joke after, and laughter broke through the gravity of the moment. In the days that followed, I walked the neighborhood with light steps. I greeted neighbors, shared smiles. I carried papers for a talk on legacy, truth, and resilience. At a youth meeting, when I spoke, they said I deserved nothing, but I reclaimed what they tried to bury. I felt their faces, hopeful, determined. After, I planted a small sapling by my porch. The soil pressed cool under my fingers. Growth, rootedness, new beginnings. That night, my phone buzzed. Invitation from a women's conference in Atlanta. My heart stilled for a beat. Then I answered, "Yes, I'll be there." I stood on the porch, the new tree's leaves stirring under moonlight. The war had ended, but the healing would take its time. A second act isn't always grand. Sometimes it's quiet return.